Hi, folks, and welcome to the Witty Vitor podcast. I'm your host, Vitor Vicente, and tonight we tackle a crucial question, the ceasefire that was just agreed, and we are all wondering what will come next. So there are a lot of questions on the table. Some think is the beginning of peace, some others believe it's just another pause before terror returns. So that's something we are going to discuss here, and we want you guys to provide us with your input in the chat box with your forecast. So we'll take a look at this truce. What does it mean for Israel's security, for the hostages that are just back in the Holy Land, and the regional balance of power. Joining me are my co-host Marco Alexander from Jerusalem, and the two fantastic guests, Daniela Giulia Traub from Tel Aviv, and Rafael Castro Martinez from Berlin. They both bring facts, analysis, and first-hand perspectives from the ground. And as always, our goal is to cut through the noise with context, clarity, and courage. And so stay with us. And as I said, use the chat box to share your questions, to add your views. And if you want to challenge us, you can also use the chat box for that purpose, because we want you to be a part of this real conversation. And if you haven't yet, don't forget to subscribe. I'm on my way to 1,000 subscribers. That's my 2025 goal. So please press that button. If you are satisfied with what we do here, hit the like button. And if you know someone who hasn't watched our show and they may benefit of it, make sure to share. Marco, my dear co-host, how are things on your end?
Not too bad. Obviously, we're very pleased that the hostages have been redeemed. That's very important. Of course, the price is questionable, but of course, there are no right answers here in this situation. Israel improved its hand during the course of these 2 years, and that was a great accomplishment. And we'll discuss this further. We'll get the insights of Daniela Traub and Rafael Castro. Let me just kick off, and I'll ask Daniela. Daniela, my feeling is, and that we are very much in a Hudna phase, um, very similar to the recurrent themes in Islamic law, which date back to the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, where our enemies regroup, gather their strength, and go on the offensive one more. I'm not taken in too much by all the rhetoric, despite the fact that President Trump is well intentioned. He certainly has been the most supportive president of Israel, president of the United States, the most supportive we've had. But I think, as Vitor alluded to, we have to cut through all the noise, and I don't know whether you agree with me, but I believe we're just dealing with basically a Hudaybiyah scenario. What are your views on that?
I absolutely agree with you. I don't think this is peace. And as we could see from October the 7th, I don't think there'll ever be peace in this region, specifically with the Palestinian people. When you have people that learn from a very young age that the only way to liberate their land is by murdering Jews, you just can't get to any settlement in which they accept the fact that Jews are living in Israel. Therefore, I don't see what's happening now as peace, even though that's how the president is presenting it. There may be peace regionally without speaking about the Palestinians, but I think that's a different topic. So when we look at the region, we have to differentiate between the Palestinian people. Will there be peace with the Palestinians or with the PA? Will there be peace in the regions? Let's say Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and the rest of it, maybe Syria and Lebanon. And we have to look at it also in a global matter when we look at what's going to happen also to the region in the light of the trade war and maybe the physical war between the US and China. So I think we have to look at this topic in different ways and different scenarios. But if we're speaking again on what you touched, the topic of the Palestinians, yes, I agree, this is a short, don't even if a Hudna, they not even bring back the bodies they promised to return of the dead hostages. So that even is not, they're not holding the end of their deal, which we again not really surprised, because when you deal with such an horrific terror group, you can't expect for much. So basically, I do agree with you that we're in a ceasefire, and they will try again when they will have the capability to do so. So Israel has to be always alert and not going to this euphoria like happened in Oslo, as if we're in peace. And anytime, just like with Lebanon, that the terror group Hamas brings their head up again, they have to be shut down.
Vitor?
Rafael, before we were live, you were sharing your mood, and your mood is pessimistic. So do you want to expand that now that we are on camera?
Yes. I'm a bit concerned by the vagueness of the 20 points. You know, they are extremely generic, and the implementation is up in the air. I'm concerned by the fact that there is a group of 4 countries, America, Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey, handling the process in Gaza, of which 2 are extremely anti-Israel, Qatar and Turkey, and Egypt is not exactly a friend of Israel either. And when you have a situation where they be proxies of Hamas, you realize why this could be.
Rafael, we are having some technical issues with your sound, just so you know.
Okay.
So I might have to interrupt you at some point, but keep going.
Yes.
It's a bit better now, so keep going. Just...
Okay, so it might well be that those countries practically advance the interests of Hamas. And I think that there were 2 mistakes made. The triumphal tone of the speeches in the Knesset, both by Trump and by Netanyahu, actually weakened Israel's and America's position. Because once you're saying to the world, we have peace for eternity, and the other side doesn't stick to its terms of the agreement, you cannot start the war without losing face. So you will always try to cover up and minimize the violations of Hamas and of the Palestinians. Secondly, I think that there was a very beautiful opportunity to establish an inquiry commission to understand why it was the case that UNRWA, instead of playing a positive, healthy, constructive role, was an ally of Hamas and indoctrinating a whole generation of young girls and boys to hate Jews and to commit terrorism. It would have been a huge embarrassment for all the European countries that threw hundreds of millions of dollars into an institution that was actually a think tank for terrorists.
Right.
That's perfectly true what you say. I think the people don't really fully realize that we have to speak of other fronts as well, namely most of the member states of the European Union, which have been financing the PA, a terrorist organization. So we're not simply dealing with the people in Judea, Samaria, and Gaza. The front is a much wider front. We have pernicious forces within the European Union, within NGOs, not to mention the United Nations. Daniela, would you like to pick up on some of those themes?
Well, I'm not pessimistic. I'm maybe cautious optimism, because in the end, we finished this. Well, okay, it's not finished, but at the point we are currently, we are holding more territory inside the Gaza Strip than what we started this war. There are more prisoners, terrorists, Palestinians that are sitting in our jails currently than there were before the 7th of October. And the hostages aren't inside Gaza anymore. Okay, and the fact is that the war isn't probably over. I don't believe now that we'll just stop fighting especially because Hamas is starting to gain power again. So I am cautiously optimistic. And one of the reasons I am is because a good friend of mine died, a soldier. He was fighting in Gaza. His name was Moshiko, and his cousin is a very good friend of mine. And half a year ago, before what happened in Iran, before we bombed Iran, and before what happened now with Gaza and the deal that was on the table that we completely withdraw and give up everything without achieving anything, I remember him writing to me and saying, did Moshiko die in vain? Was it all for nothing? Now, this time around, where we have 53% of the Gaza Strip and all the hostages are home, and we're not, it doesn't mean that the war ended. It just means that we just currently stopped. This time around, he said to me, he didn't die in vain. There was a purpose for his death.
Yeah.
So if you hear that, you understand that something is different than what happened half a year ago. You see it is different than the other deals. Now, I absolutely agree. Israel still has its challenges. Egypt is participating more and more and getting closer more and more to Russia, which means it's getting closer to China, which is not on our side. And it's absolutely against the United States. And this is one of the reasons why Trump is upset with Sisi. And we see Turkey trying to come into the void that Iran left after we bombed and weakened Iran. So basically, we do have these two enemies that are getting stronger. We also have the Egyptian army going into Sinai, but this actually happened even before the 7th of October. And so we do have still threats, but yet I do believe that Israel is the strongest it has been in the last 30 years, because it annihilated its threat from Syria and it's holding territory there in order to push the threat even further away from our border. In Lebanon, we completely annihilated Hezbollah. They still exist, but they're much weaker than what they actually were. And we annihilated the most dangerous enemy we had in the last few years, Iran. So Israel has changed the face of the Middle East completely. Yes, it still has enemies, but they're not as strong as they were. And if we go back to what I said before, if we look at also as a regional issue and a global issue, one of the most important things Trump is working on currently is defeating China. And he's doing it by different measures. One of them is the different routes he's creating against the Silk and Belt route of the Chinese. So he has the IMEC 1, that is the Middle Eastern route from India through Saudi Arabia, through Israel and up to Europe in order to disconnect Europe from Russia and again from China. Okay, you have that, and then you have the Luzon route, which is in the Philippines, hopefully will connect also to Japan, and so on to the other countries there, also to weaken China. Then you have the beneath Azerbaijan and Armenia in order to bypass Iran. So we have these several trade routes that are supposed to weaken China. Okay, so it's actually a much bigger war in which he's trying to recruit as many Muslim countries alongside Israel and the US in order to weaken China and Russia. So in the end, it's a much bigger story than just Turkey or Egypt getting stronger. And that's why I say I'm cautiously optimistic, because Israel is stronger than what it was on October the 6th. Even though it's not perfect, and even though there's still danger, there are still dangers, we are stronger. I also believe in spirit we are stronger. I do think that now, okay, we still have to wait for the bodies to come back, but now that all the hostages are home, the alive ones, we can start healing and working on our combined identity, which is Israeli and Jewish, which was very much in conflict and battle. The Israeli part and the Jewish part, they were in conflict on the 6th of October. People wanted to pray in Tel Aviv, in Dizengoff, in Kikar Dizengoff on Yom Kippur, and other Jews came and violently prevented them from doing so. This Yom Kippur, you didn't see stuff like that anymore. You hear much more people speaking about God and the Jewish identity and the importance of the Jewish identity, because people learned the last 2 years that even though they see themselves maybe as people of the world, I don't have a land, I don't have a country, I can be wherever I want to be and who I want to be. A lot of people in the world and many countries in the world said, no, you're a Jew, and we'll hate you, and we won't support you, and we won't stand alongside your cause, even though it may be same cause as theirs. So a lot of us are Jews in the US, where they stood with the Me Too movement and Black Lives Matter movement, and suddenly their friends aren't standing with them after October the 7th. So a lot of people understood they are Jews first. And
Very
I think
good.
that's also a level that has to be dealt with, not only the regional and global level, but also the identity issue that Israel has to go through now after, trying to heal itself after these 2 very bloody years.
So this is very complex, as we can see, and we want everyone to contribute, not just the 4 of us who are here talking, but also you guys who are watching. So make sure to use the chat box. And I want to thank Alessandro to be the first person on the other side providing questions for our conversation. And the question he addressed is, since Hamas is already violating terms as expected, returning non-Israeli bodies, blah blah blah. I guess they won't disarm at all when they will fight again. So I think what Alessandro is asking is, where does Hamas stand in the middle of this mayhem? Are they playing games? Are they ready to fight? They are just hiding and waiting to receive instructions from Qatar. What sort of course of action is Hamas preparing for the next few days? Can we project some behavior, or it's too much of a crystal ball exercise? Maybe Rafael, you can start, and then I pass the ball to Daniela.
I think that it's very hard to understand Hamas, because when you apply Western canons of rationality and thinking, you usually are mistaken. And this leads to the opposite extreme of thinking that they're crazy, irrational, and fanatic, which is also wrong, because you have to understand the parameters of the worldview. And on the basis of those parameters, they're extremely irrational. Just think of the fact that they devoted 15 years to plan October 7th. And with all due respect to Israel, I doubt that there's any ministry in Israel with 15-year plans in the future. So, they will probably create managed uncertainty, so that to have as much leverage vis-a-vis Israel, vis-a-vis the countries that are going to send troops in Gaza Strip. And I don't think the fight thing will resume. If I were Israel, instead of fighting, I would actually just rearrest the release terrorists as a punishment for Hamas violation of agreed upon terms.
Daniela, can you add your take to Alessandro's query? I think you're muted, Daniela.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear that. Yeah, my internet went a bit shaky there. I think Hamas now is testing us, the same as Hezbollah did after the ceasefire. They're testing our limits to see how far they can push us without us reacting. I believe, and maybe I'm wrong, that the Israeli government currently are going to act exactly like they are acting with Hezbollah. Anytime they identify or detect any terrorist activity, they will bomb that specific area, just like they're doing with Lebanon. I don't think they will, and maybe there will be specific covert operations of soldiers going in, but we won't see the army moving in to Gaza again, above the 53%, the yellow line. So I think that's how the Israeli government is going to deal with it. I don't know if that's the ultimate way. I'm not convinced. I also think there's a big difference between Lebanon and the Gaza Strip. The fact is that I spoke to some people in Lebanon, Shiites and Sunnis. Now, these people used to live in Lebanon. They're not living there anymore. They ran away. And they say, from what they speak to people in Lebanon, that they want peace with Israel. They want normalization with Israel. Now, in Lebanon, there are 3 laws against normalization with Israel that even if you tweet to an Israeli on the web, you can be arrested. Okay, so the Lebanese government has to cancel those laws in order for there to be a normalization. But these people, even though there were laws in place, were willing to say, yes, we want Israel to normalize relations with us. Second, and this is very important, they want Israel to continue bombing Hezbollah because we can't handle Hezbollah. So they were encouraging the Israeli side to continue bombing, specifically, as Israel is doing now, in order to weaken Hezbollah. So that's why I also think that that will be the tactics with Hamas, at least until President Trump says, I had enough, you can go in. If that will happen, I don't know if it will. But I do believe that everything that happened in the war in the last year was absolutely coordinated with Trump step by step. I don't think he was surprised by anything, not even the bombing in Qatar.
So why did BBC... Why did Bibi? So sorry, I want to ask this to Daniela. Why did Bibi say sorry? Was it just for the camera?
I think it was all staged. Okay. I think that Israel has the capability to know exactly where they are. Think about the Houthis in Yemen. It was not a target of the IDF before they started bombing Israel. This was a war that belonged to Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Okay? And yet the IDF knew how to get to each and every one of them. They know how to get to the people they want to get to. Missing like that is on purpose. That's my humble opinion. And I do believe it was staged in order to push the leaders of Hamas to an agreement for them to understand that they're mortal, that they can die, that the next hit will be death. And it pushed them towards that realization, that and the military pressure that was put on the rest of the terrorists in Gaza. But everything, the way they coordinated the bombing on Iran, Qatar, Lebanon, everything was known to the president.
Folks that are watching us, if you want to be part of the first 1,000 subscribers, use that QR and you can subscribe to my channel without going through all the steps. So just let know people that they can claim in the future that they'll be part of the initial tribe, and they can say it out loud. Rafael, sorry, I cut you off.
I mean, I think an important point to remember is also that in all these conflicts with the neighbors, victory and defeat in our culture are based on who loses more lives. But on the other side, the only parameter that counts is loss of territory. Because in any conflict in which one Israeli Jew dies, even if 100,000 Muslims die, the 100,000 Muslims are in heaven, the Jews in hell, so it's always a victory. But when territory is lost, that's when things become problematic. So I would really hope that if the violations of Hamas are systematic, that Israel simply annexes, the northern strip of Gaza, so that Hamas loses territory, which is an irrecoverable loss, because land does not go to heaven, land does not go to hell, it's just lost.
So in your estimation, Rafael, can Israel claim victory, or they need to go to extra time?
Victory vis-a-vis whom? Hamas? I don't think Israel can claim victory, because if you look at what Hamas was trying to achieve, which was, in addition to massacring and committing atrocities, they wanted to derail the normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel, and they managed to do that. Not because the Saudi kingdom is horrified by the death toll in Gaza, but because, in Islamic terms, October 7 was such a quote unquote accomplishment that Saudi Arabia cannot be seen as making concessions and compromising with the Zionist entity after this so-called feat of Hamas. And it's actually remarkable that given the progress in negotiations between Saudi Riyadh and Jerusalem, the whole army wasn't mobilized to prevent something like that from happening. Because had the custodians of Mecca and Medina recognized Zionism, made peace with the Jewish state, Hamas, Islamic Jihad would have been completely discredited in the eyes of a lot of Sunni Muslims.
I think it's a
Malcolm?
mistake. Yeah, I think it's a mistake to separate Hamas from the wider Arab world. I think even to separate, to neglect the notion of Palestinianism as a genocidal idea is also a mistake. When we have to bear in mind that, essentially speaking, Palestinianism is a proxy war that has been waged by the surrounding Arab countries against Israel. It was never about a mythical people that suddenly came into existence. The nature of this conflict is the desire by the surrounding Arab states to destroy Israel. Now, I'm not saying that everybody wants to destroy Israel, but this has, generally speaking, been a theme running through the conflict. Of course, we can now, if things have changed, it's because, yes, certainly there might be a convergence of interests, but it's not as if we're going. I think we have to analyze what happened. We have to bear in mind what happened with Egypt. People became very euphoric about Camp David. I personally was always against any concessions to the Egyptians. I think it was an enormous mistake. Essentially speaking, what Israel did was it refunded the Egyptians for a war of aggression that they lost, and they got an apartment in Cairo, which they called an embassy. The only way that Israel will be respected in this region if it respects itself. And I think, unfortunately, during the past 40, 50 years, since people got into the land for peace mode, this has gone amiss. Israel was more respected before it started becoming a bargain basement regime, giving land for so-called peace. And I think this is a huge flaw which we still haven't redeemed. We still haven't mended this. We think we can buy peace, and that's an enormous mistake.
I have a couple of more questions to Daniela. Sorry, Rafael, because I need to prioritize Daniela. She only has 30 more minutes, and every minute with Daniela is precious. So I really need to do my best to address all the questions here. They're not mine, they're from a viewer. So he wants to address this to someone who is in Israel. And I think you are in the right position to provide the answer. So I'm going to share his questions because I was actually moved by the questions and the compliments here. So I'm going to share my screen. Let me know if you can see it. So he is saying, I'm going to suggest 3 questions. Start from the top. And the first is, why does the government of Israel continue to approve the exchange of terrorists who are serving multiple life sentences for innocent civilians? Would you like to comment on that, Daniela?
For many years now, people are trying to push the death penalty for terrorists, which doesn't exist in Israel. Death penalty only exists for Nazis. The thing is, in my view, and in many other people's view in Israel, the terrorists of Hamas and the PLO their actions are equivalent to some of the things that the Nazis did. But in order for us to bring forward the death sentence, a lot has to change here. And I do believe that the government from the beginning was planning to exchange the hostages for these terrorists, and therefore they didn't bring forward the death penalty, even though it was requested by the people. I think it's a mistake. I think that in the end, if you bring forward the death penalty for terrorists who murdered, slaughtered, raped, tortured Jews, and not only Jews, Christians, Druze, Bedouins, then you annihilate the option of swapping. They won't even kidnap people because they know that there's nobody to swap with. You have to make it just not worthy for them to kidnap anymore. And as you said, if you don't have prisoners to swap and you take land for each person you kidnap, then basically it just becomes not worthy anymore for them to actually kidnap Jews. And I believe that's the way, but I think that's it's considered more radical thinking, and people don't want to bring the death penalty. A lot of people don't want to do that because they still want to have the card of what will happen if we will have hostages, how will we bring them back? If we don't, we won't have terrorists in our jail. I think it's just upside down, and that's just my opinion on the matter. I don't know if it's right or wrong. I just think that that's a more realistic way to look at the Middle East. And just to what you said about the different Arab states, I would put a differentiation between the states. Now, in the end, yes, a lot of the Muslims don't want the Jews here. But then you have states that, not out of the love of Israel, but out of the benefit of cooperating with Israel, would prefer to see Israel succeeding than the Palestinians succeeding. Let's say I'll take, for example, the UAE.
I'm not in disagreement, Daniela. I'm not in disagreement with you on this. I agree with you. I believe there is movement in certain sectors of the Arab world, and
sure.
I'm sure there are plenty of decent Muslims. I just wanted to clarify that, who are indeed tired of the yoke of Palestinianism invading every aspect of their life.
And so much money that they have invested in the Palestinians, and nothing came out of it except for terrorism, which actually those specific countries like the UAE or Saudi or Bahrain and Morocco are actually fighting. They're extremely scared of terrorism, and they know that if the Palestinians succeed, that terrorism will actually resonate in their countries. A lot of the cooperation in the war against the Houthis was conducted with Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Bahrain. Okay? So there is cooperation behind the scenes between Israel and these countries, especially when it's coming to the main IMEC idea of the gas and the oil flowing from those countries through Israel and up to Europe. Okay? So that
is true, Daniela, and I agree with you on that. That, I believe, is to a greater extent the result of blowback, in the sense they've seen the unpleasant consequences of Palestinianism within their own societies. Sorry if I interrupted you.
Yeah. But
feel free.
I'd like to push back a little bit, because for until a couple of decades ago, the conventional wisdom was that the Muslims, the Arabs, wanted peace with Israel. It was the dictators who were opposed to it. Now it's more and more obvious that the contrary is the case. The more democratic the countries are, like Tunisia, Kuwait, or Lebanon, the more anti-Israel they tend to be. Whereas the more they have like enlightened autocracies, like the Emirates, like Bahrain, then the more open they are to understand the benefits of if not loving Israel, but at least benefiting from the synergies that can be built. And honestly, there is one simple litmus test. As long as Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi will be a popular hero on the Arab Muslim street, you can rest assured that the dream of raising the flag of Hamas or of Palestine on Tel Aviv will be very much alive.
Rafael, but
don't doubt it.
I'm not 100%
I
sure
absolutely
about
agree
that
with you.
because, sorry, I'm just push back here. When you say that if a country is autocratic, they are likely to be friends with Israel, but Iran is very much autocratic, and it's the enemy number one. So I don't think it's that mathematical.
No. I'm not saying that all autocracies are pro-Israel. I'm saying that those that are enlightened autocracies, not autocracies, enlightened autocracies. And it's also very interesting to see the fanatical hatred of Israel coming from Shia quarters, Iran, Hezbollah, the Houthis. And why is that? Because it's a bit like in the Ivy League, Harvard and Yale. The Sunnis are Harvard, the Shias are Yale, and the Shias need to prove that they're the first, like Yale. So they defeating Israel, there where Saudi Arabia and Egypt failed, is their way of claiming that they are the real and authentic and better expression of Islam, in my opinion.
So where does Turkey sit on that?
I just maybe want to add, the Muslim countries that decided that their people actually matter and that they want to be a prosperous country, those are the states that are actually trying to cooperate with Israel. Because Israel's high tech is its oil. And all these countries benefit very much from Israel's technology. And in the end, for knowledge to bring prosperity and growth, you need cooperation between different countries. Because think about the global market. Okay, I can't have a high-tech economy just internally. It's global. It's all about cooperation, knowledge spills between the countries, corporations of knowledge and investments and so on. In order to do that, they need Israel, specifically as Israel is the leading technological country in the region. If they want their people to be more prosperous and rich and happier and not as miserable as a lot of the other Muslim states, they need Israel. And there are several countries like that. You can see it in the UAE, and you can see it also starting to happen in Saudi Arabia. You can see it in Bahrain. Also, there's a move inside Morocco. They're not there. A lot of them aren't there yet. The UAE actually is in a good place, but a lot of the countries aren't there yet. But if you see their move from 2008, from the world economic crisis until today, you see an extreme move towards that direction. And those years, you also see the tightening of relations between Israel, even if it was behind the scenes, between Israel and those countries, which eventually developed into the Abraham Accords, and maybe even, and I do believe that Saudi Arabia will sign an agreement with Israel. It may be not as warm as the one with the UAE, but that's okay. We're not looking for a lover, we're looking for a partner. So I believe that the Saudis will sign it, and I don't believe Hamas has achieved its goal. I think it postponed the signing of the agreement, which was supposed to be signed already 2 years ago, but it will be signed in the upcoming year, and that's also the vision of the president.
Amen.
I would like to sort of shift our attention now to, because I think perhaps things may go on the back burner for a while here in this region where we are, Daniela, but I'd like to explore the effects of Palestinianism in Europe, because the Palestinists and the pro-Pal movement are rather frustrated with the idea of a ceasefire. Would you like to comment on that? And then Rafael, you can take it up.
Well, it depends. I think we have to look at what's happening internally within France and the UK specifically, with the counter movement trying to, I don't know if it's combat Islam or at least face Islam. And you can see that their symbol is the Crusader symbol, notoriously known as fighting Islam and Muslims. The question is, will they win or not? Because the Palestinianism is just a mirror to Islamism inside Europe, which is taking over Europe, which we just see, in the West. We don't see it. because they aren't letting any Muslims in. And I do hope for Europe that they'll manage to hold on to their identity, but because I do think there will be specific countries in Europe that will not be recognized in the upcoming years, due to the fact that Europeans' birth rate is extremely low. They're not fighting back, and they're letting more and more and more immigrants, Muslim immigrants, inside. And these immigrants are saying, we're not here to be part of the Christian, Western, liberal civilization. We are here to take over. And that's exactly what will happen. The Muslims always say what they intend to do. They're not hiding it. But in the West, we're like, no, they're great. Everybody's great. We welcome everybody. And we welcome everybody on the expense of ourselves. And I do believe that everything first happens in Jerusalem, and then it spreads out to the rest of the world. So we could see what happened here with the Muslims. It's just a mirror of what's going to happen in Europe. And I do hope that the movement trying to cherish Christianity and cherish liberalism and cherish the ideas on which Europe was founded, the fact that we free people, that belongs to Europe. That's in Europe's credit. And I do hope that that will be maintained, because that's not what Islam cherishes. And there are some very good Muslims, and there are some very good Muslim states. As I said, the UAE, I'm in awe always when I research the UAE or when I speak to people there. But most places, the leaders don't take it to that direction. They take it to a very, very dark and oppressive direction, and that's where Europe is going. And I absolutely hope that Europeans will rise. Yeah, that's it.
I would like to add one thing, that if you talk to Arabs and Muslims in Arab and Muslim countries, you notice that there is a much greater readiness to talk about the ills of extremism, the ills of wallowing in ignorance and fanaticism and poverty. In Europe and also in America, Muslim communities are not doing that for two reasons. First of all, because the Western liberal democratic free market basically allows them to benefit from the work and the efforts of others without having to pay any consequences for this functionality of their value system. And secondly, because they get complete cover from leftists against any criticism, no matter how justified, who immediately jump in and say, "Oh, what you're saying is racist, Islamophobic, and so forth and so forth." And in my personal experience, the real culprits of the calamitous situation which is approaching in Western Europe is not the average Muslim in Paris or in Berlin, but it's the elites that have actually censored not only constructive criticism of the problems of certain communities, but have also delegitimized voices within those communities that wanted to reform something. There is a very brave Egyptian German man called Hamid Abdel Samad, who wrote books denouncing exactly what we know needs to be denounced. And he was shunned by the entire German establishment because he gave a speech to the AfD once. And even though he wrote a book expressing his love and gratitude to Germany, this book should be compulsory reading in all high schools and universities. But here, Hamid Abdel Samad became a pariah figure and has basically left the country, like other open-minded Muslims who have realized that if you want to have a career in Western Europe as a Muslim or as a person of color, you have to basically play the victim role, complain about racism, xenophobia, Islamophobia, and then you'll get invited to TV shows, you'll get awards from universities, from the government. But if you're someone who is loyal, thankful, then you will have a very hard time.
There's a comment here that I want to share with Marco, since it's related to Italy and you pay a lot of attention to what happened in that part of Europe, and Alessandro is saying in Italy still today you have a disgusting situation which from the media to any forgotten person, everything they say is free Palestine, etc. How are things in Italy? Because we had a podcast with two other folks, I think it was 1 or 2 weeks ago, and Italy was in flames. Did things cool down, or it's the same chaos?
No, I don't believe things have cooled down. The Palestinianism is the cause célèbre of the chattering classes, of the academics, and it has infected the student body in Italy, as well as, of course, the unions. The unions, of course, have lost any sense of mission with regard to the working classes, so they've taken up this Palestinist ideology, which in a sense, though they complain about non-existent genocides, what is really happening is we're seeing a process of neuronicide, where people are showing an incapacity to think, and which has compromised the cognitive ability of huge swathes of society. And this latches onto atavic anti-Semitism. So it is a very big problem in Italy. Now, I'm not saying that the majority of Italians are anti-Semitic, but it doesn't take a majority to define a reality, as we saw in Nazi Germany. The majority of Germans in the 30s were not necessarily anti-Semitic, but they were sucked into this mechanism. And essentially speaking, to a certain extent, they became cogs in a mechanism over which they lost control. So the situation in Italy is pretty bad in that sense. We don't see the same sense of realization that we see in the United Kingdom, where there has been a reaction. In Britain, we've seen people taking to the streets, British patriots, and you see very often you see the Israeli flag flying alongside the Union Jack. Certainly, we've seen the flag raising the colors, which is really taken off in the UK. Nothing similar to that has happened in Italy, and I'm not sure what it'll take for things to change. The Italians seem to a great extent to have been put to sleep. We see there is a media academic complex which has been at work for a very long time in Italy. Bear in mind that Italy, the Italian state, had tacit agreements with the PLO, which stretch back decades. Basically, the PLO were free to run amok in Italy, and they carried out a number of deadly terrorist attacks, both at airports and against the Jewish community. This hasn't disappeared. This hasn't disappeared. You hear even the president of Italy going out of the way saying he's not an anti-Semite, but on the other hand, these do not chime with his other statements. So it's not a happy state of affairs. It's not the worst of realities in Europe. We see realities which are worse, but certainly dormant anti-Semitism has awoken in great style. Put it that way.
I have a question about Italy. Sorry, Rafael. I want to stay in Italy for a few minutes more, if you don't mind. And I want to compare. Sorry. Hope I'm not getting sick. I want to compare Italy with Germany. I think in Germany, there's a whole complex of flagging the German flag, because if you do that, you are still seen as a supporter of the Nazi regime of the 30s or the 40s, unless there is a football game, let's say. So I think that's a replication of fascism. We in Portugal, we have some of that. I know Spanish too, not as much as in Germany, but there is a price to pay to put, let's say, our flag on the Balkan. Is it something that may constrain the Italians?
I mean, I think that the main difference between Britain and Italy is that in Britain the pro-Palestinian chaos was led by non-native Britons, whereas in Italy it was led by leftist Italians. So I think that's the reason that native-born Britons came out to the streets with the Israeli flags, because they felt that they were being, they were having their fellow Jewish citizens being harassed by people, who were either born abroad or who were second-generation immigrants. In Italy, this is not the case. Of course, there were North African, primarily immigrants, who went to those demonstrations, but the bulk is, like 100% Italian. And Marco, just to illustrate the gravity of the situation, among the leftist and educated elites, the anti-Semitism is just, predominant. I had a colleague at a school, an Italian school here in Berlin. I wanted his help to get my daughter in the school, and we had a nice exchange. He volunteered to help. Apparently, he must have understood that I'm very pro-Israel. He is very pro-Palestinian, and he stopped answering all the emails. And I think it's extremely unfair that my daughter has to pay the price for the views of her father. But that was not an isolated instance. I also requested to participate in a book reading club on Facebook. I asked for the address. They must have seen my profile was the Western Wall, and I never got an answer. So nowadays, if you want to do anything with the literati, you better hide that you have anything to do with Jews or Judaism.
Rafael, that's very interesting what you just said, that your daughter paid a price for your positions for Israel. Now, I would be very skeptical if, let's say, the daughter of your friend will pay the same price. Probably she will be promoted because your friend is endorsing the Palestinian views. So
no, but but I'll tell you,
doesn't make any sense whether the father views matter or don't.
No. I mean, if my friend thought Jewish, would say, "Oh, wonderful! Let the daughter of this pastor come here so I can tell her how evil the Zionists are." I mean, that's what I would do. I would have her daughter taught by me, so that she can understand why the Zionists are right. But instead, he just decided that my daughter didn't deserve an Italian education because of my views. So it's very sad.
What I, with your permission, Vitor, I'd like to reaffirm what has been happening in Italian schools, by the way. Basically, children are being brainwashed and indoctrinated. Very young children have been brought to demonstrations. They have been fed the lies. We see serial slander going on in the classroom, teachers slandering the Jews, misrepresenting the conflict. And I know some of these personally because they participated at seminars in Yad Vashem, and they've gone back to Italy rather, worse than before. So I think this is something that Yad Vashem really needs to look into as well.
I mean, I think we need
Rafael. Daniela is about to leave, so that I have the final word.
Just in favor, second of Italy, my grandmother is Italian. She was Christian from Pieve Bresciano, next to an hour from Florence, and they are family from the 12th century. And she and the family saved Jews in the Holocaust. And she saved my grandfather, who was captured by the Germans and ran away. She found him and hid him. And she also saved other people. And many Italians saved Jews during Second World War, even though that at the beginning they chose the wrong side. They understood very quickly that they were on the wrong side, and that's why they remembered so well, while the Germans are remembered so poorly. I do believe that the Italian nation is a very proud nation, where the Brits and the Germans can't even hold up their flag without being called nationalistic. In Italy, you're proud of your flag, you're proud of your tradition, you're proud of your food, you're proud of everything that Italy presents and represents. And I do believe that even though the Italians haven't woken up, also in the Second World War, it took them a long time to wake up. I do believe they will wake up. It will take them time, but I can't say certain. But as I know the Italian nation, I do believe that they will join the right side. Late, but they will.
That's a happy note to finish, Daniela.
Yeah, no, I wasn't saying that. I in no shape or way did I say that the majority of Italians were anti-Semitic. What I'm saying was that the defining element, unfortunately, the people that define the zeitgeist. Of course, many Italians say views. I'm also half Italian myself, so I lived in Italy for 20 years. But there is a reality that we can't ignore. What's happening in the class? What's happening in the classroom?
There's going to be a lot of hypocrisy because Europe's going to need Israel's weapons and technology. It already needs Israel's weapons and technology, and it's already purchasing Israel's weapons and technology while it's bad-mouthing it loud. But Israel is okay with it, and it always was okay with it. The same it was okay with Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco, bad-mouthing Israel in public, but buying its technology backstage. So that's also going to what's going to happen with Europe. And if there'll be also, it depends on the right-wing government, but if you go to extreme right, obviously there's anti-Semitism also there. But if you let's say have Tommy Robinson in the UK that's now visiting Israel, elected, if he decides to run, then obviously you will have a more friendly government, at least government. I don't know about the people. But I do think if not, on the topic of if there will still be public anti-Semitism behind the scenes, Israel is going to become very rich out of this war. And as I said, that's Israel's oil. It's technology, it's brains, it's knowledge, and the world needs it now. So when you need it, you're strong.
I would like to add a little, one more that I have, that good societies become strong with problems, bad societies, mediocre societies become weak with problems, and bad societies blame Jews with problems for their problems.
No, I'd like to pick up on one thing that you said. I believe that Judeo-Christian civilization will ultimately prevail. That I agree with you on that, but the price might be very high. That's
absolutely. It's going to be extremely high. Many people in Europe are going to die. That's just what's going to happen, and it's horrible and it's horrific. But honestly, that's what's going to happen, because that's the direction in which the clash of the civilizations is going right now. And I do hope that they'll manage to stop it in time. But that's the direction in which it's heading right now. And it's, for me, it's heartbreaking. I love Europe.
Yeah. When you say death, are you referring to, sorry, Daniela, are you referring to a civil war or?
Well, it depends. You have the Russian threat from one side, and then you have the internal threat, which is a civil war between the Muslims and the liberals or Christians. Yeah.
Right. And
that's not what I said. That's in the Clash of Civilizations, written many years ago, on where Europe is actually heading, and The Strange Death of Europe by Douglas Murray. Same. I'm quoting people that are smarter than me.
Nobody's smarter than you.
Absolutely, everybody's smarter than me. I have an opinion about several things. Maybe I know a bit more, but many people are smarter than me.
You must not exceed in modesty. You must.
No.
No, I think one thing that what we're seeing in Europe is basically the harassment on the side of Muslims is pushing out Jews from the continent. And this is reminiscent of what happened in North Africa and the Middle East shortly after the establishment of Israel. The difference is that the power and the number ratios are reversed. So whereas in North Africa and the Middle East, the Muslims were the majority, in Europe it's the Christians. So after the Jews, the Christians got pushed out. And I think that in Europe, it will be the Muslims who will get pushed out once the Jews, have been forced to make Aliyah.
Well, the Jews
Because
don't want to be caught in between. That's
no,
the
no,
main
but
thing.
you know,
Yeah.
but
The
right
Jews are
right now,
always caught in between.
no, I mean, right
By,
now,
by
I
choice,
think
very often.
right now the Christian, I mean, many people in Europe are thinking, okay, this is a squabble between Muslims and Jews. Who cares what happens to the Jews? But once the Jews are away, I mean, it's obvious that the front is going to be Christians against Muslims, and
No,
then
that's
the
all.
Muslims are
But that's
numerically
all.
weak, so they will leave.
That's all too clear in the sense that we see on a constant basis, we see Islamic prayer, Islamic prayer being carried out in public spaces, in front of churches. This, unfortunately, people in Britain are certainly the beginning to join the dots, but not in Italy and in other countries. Italy's lagging behind. But this has been this was set in train many years ago. Many years ago. I think what's happening now is the Islamists have overplayed their hand. Had they been a little more subtle, then they could have got away with it. But they've been overplaying their hand.
Like they always do.
They always do, yeah. But it's interesting because I have a friend who's gay who decided to buy a house outside the big city because he said in Europe, just won't say the country, but he decided to buy a house outside the big city because he said they first come for the Jews and then for the gays. And he said, I want to be in the middle of it. I want to be as far as possible from the city center, from any big city. So then when the riots arrive, when there'll be a massacre, they will be far away from me. And this is a Christian guy. Okay, so it's not settling. It's very upsetting. But
I mean, I think another
that's the
problem is
reality.
that whereas the Muslims and are very devout, there are very few real Christians in Europe. I mean, even a lot of the clergy don't really believe very deeply what they're supposed to believe, and you see this in the statements. For example, the previous pope. When you read his sermons, it was just a collection of mantras. You didn't sense any genuine faith, and
Yes, yeah.
and the birth rate plummets when religiosity weakens.
Or when you see churches with trans flags, that's it. That they're gone.
I mean, honestly, that's the lesser problem. The problem is,
It's not a problem, Rafael. It's a symptom. It's a symptom that
it,
something
it,
is very wrong.
it is, but the general symptom is like if you believe in God, if you believe in the Bible, you don't you don't feel that you have to adapt to the zeitgeist every decade or so. And a lot of churches in Europe are just like the religious
I think
branch
they are. I think they are in
of Greenpeace.
survival. I think they're in survival mode. They're trying to cope with the way things are going. I think it's a wrong strategy because then no one is going to take them seriously. And if they are already empty, they will be, completely empty going forward. So I think it's a very bad approach. If they stick to what they are, at least people will respect them. They might not attend the masses on Sunday, but at least people will feel some respect when you pass by the church. By this, they are chameleons. That's what they are.
I mean, they're opting for quantity over quality, and at the end, they will have neither.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, but I have to leave you guys. Yeah, I have to leave you guys. But I do want to conclude in a more positive note because I was very pessimistic here. I do believe that the West is waking up. And I do believe maybe Italy is not there yet, but you can see it in the UK and you can see it in Germany. And even though the way won't be easy, I do believe that something has shifted and something has begun. And I do believe that President Trump is leading the world to a more secure place with all the treaties that are supposed to prevent China from growing, which is something we didn't speak about, but China is a big threat and is funding a lot of this behind the scenes. So
it's been doing that for a long time. It's been doing that to our detriment here in Israel. I think just to remind you of episodes where the Chinese banks were involved in money transfers of certain actors, and it was hushed up for out of convenience. But that's a story.
Absolutely.
That's a story for another time. But it's very interesting what you say, and I think you're perfectly correct when you. I think what President Trump is doing is engaging in a very interesting reconfiguration of arrangements, and I think that is his great merit. Whether he will succeed or not, that's another matter. But the idea is correct.
Absolutely. And I do think that Israel is an example for the West that you can beat extremism. I think Israel dealt very well with Syria, with Lebanon, with Iran, with the Houthis in Yemen. And please God, also, it will deal well with the Palestinians because we're still in the middle of it and it wasn't that impressive up until now. So I do think that shows that we can, as a liberal democratic society, win. At least I hope so. So on that note, I will leave you guys, and thank you so much for having me this evening. It was such a pleasure speaking to you all.
Thank you.
Daniela, thank you. Daniela, thank you for the beautiful backdrop. I love that. I love the drawing.
Dega. Bye.
Bye, Daniela. Just on that note of, let me put this right, and put Rafael in the middle, and please don't go too egomaniac about it. On that note of Germany and Austria, some people might say it's irrelevant. Your camera is not okay, Rafael. So
he's in the process of being transfigured. He's being transfigured.
Yeah, we talk about the
below it's nice.
I hope it wasn't an inspiration for you. No, I was just saying I know I don't give a flying fuck about the Eurovision, but Germany and Austria announced that if Israel would be kicked out, they wouldn't participate. Now I know this is just Eurovision, but it's still a big move considering that the Eurovision is being used against Israel. It's pretty to see that some others are using it in a different direction. Rafael, you can say things about Eurovision because you know more than me about it. So,
I mean, it's very interesting because now a lot of people are reading it as a very brave decision to support Israel, but in reality, what happened was that Chancellor Merz was interviewed, and the interviewer asked him, "Do you think that Germany should participate if Israel is boycotted?" And the phrase was, or the question was formulated in a way that, Merz couldn't really say anything except no. I think it shouldn't. And he said no, but in a very sort of weak way. And the press took on and read into that answer a determination to side with Israel, which really, if it had been the real intention of the government, it would have been something that it would have been declared publicly in a statement, and not just as an answer to a question. So the German government did the right thing, but it was something quite rocambolesque. Sorry. And my impression is that once Germany took that position, or was construed as taking that position, then Austria, which is historically the partner in crime, couldn't be any less decent, and they said, okay, then we won't host Eurovision if Israel is banned.
Yeah, I don't know about it. I don't really pay attention to Eurovision, but thanks for clarifying, and that goes in line with another comment I received the other day. So thank you, Rafael, and I want to highlight that because that made me, and I think should make you, Marco, very proud. Someone just said, I'm going to read it out loud because I cannot find it now, the page, but someone just said this, and I want the viewers to take this into consideration. Okay, let me just find it here. They are saying that, where's the comment? Sorry about this. Just give me 10 seconds, I'll get there. Just want to promote what we do here. It's important. So someone just wrote the other day, Thank you, Vitor. I have come to rely on your podcast to be the truth channel, given the amount of noise from various media outlets that claim to have the true picture of what's happening on Israel. So here we are, fulfilling our mission that offers Marco every Wednesday with guests like Rafael, who just clarifies something that I was not very keen about it. So that's that's what we are here for providing what others are hiding. So if you want to be part of this community, guys, press the subscribe button. We're trying to get 1,000 by the end of the year. Any final remarks since we are coming to an end? Marco, Rafael?
No, I think we've pretty much said as much as we could say. I reaffirm that this is merely a Hudna. Israel needs to gather its sense to learn from its mistakes prior to the 7th of October, and it needs to take stock and take the right measures now. It needs to get its act together, which it has to a great extent, but there's a lot of work to be done.
Rafael, anything from your end, maybe on Eurovision?
No, I would like to point something out regarding the American delegation that flew to Israel. There was President Trump, there was Secretary of State Rubio, there was Secretary of Defense Hegseth, but J.D. Vance was not there, and it's not the first time that basically avoids visiting Israel, and I think that should raise a great deal of concern, because if he's not there on the day when a joint Israeli-American triumph is celebrated, then it means that it could mean that he's not very keen about America investing in its relationship with Israel in the future. Let us remember that when asked, Vance has refused to criticize or condemn the statements of Tucker Carlson, and that Tucker Carlson was one of those who most insisted that he be nominated as the running mate of Donald Trump for the presidential election. So I would like raise this issue, because I think it's something we should be concerned about.
It's a red flag. Yeah. Right. So before we go, I just want to advertise my new column in the Times of Israel. I've initiated it last week. So for those who are interested in reading articles, here is my second about the release of the hostage a couple of days back. So you can get to, I'm going to put the link in the description, you can access that article. And if you want to explore the others, all you need to do is click on my blog here. So if someone want to have some heavy bedtime reading, they can use my Times of Israel column. Yeah, so with that, I'm going to put an end in this conversation. So thanks, Rafael, for your valuable insights. I want also to express my gratitude for the viewers to stay with us for the whole session, share their views, add some additional insights, and help us with the dynamic of the conversation. We'll be here again on Wednesday, same time, same channel. So make sure to press the bell button that you are aware of what is the topic in advance. And if you want to share some suggestions for upcoming topics, use the chat box or send us an email. Either way, we will take into consideration, and we will bring those themes to the discussion going forward. If you know someone who missed the conversation and they may benefit of it, share. And if you are satisfied with what we did here today, make sure to press the like button below. Also, have a good evening, folks, and I see you very soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.